This is the first part of a two-part interview with Sanford Tollette. The interview was conducted on November 8, 2008 in Vancouver, Washington.
Interesting for me how this happened, and I've been reflecting on this. I did have a camp experience, but mine was a little bit different. My parents were educators, and it was during the time in which school systems were segregated, and we had then at that time called split-term school in the South, where the minority schools would stop according to the planting or picking or cultivating season. So as a little boy growing up, these schools were, for one, it was called Smackover Training School. We were going to be trained to do something. And we would have these periods, and because my father and mother were educators, they were not allowed to mix with the other blacks and the teachers, and they had to live on site. So it was that kind of educational experience. So in the meantime, they had to keep the educated blacks out of the community where, quote unquote, the uneducated blacks lived. And so for me as a kid, then who did I play with? Because we lived on the site. So the school was a camp. My thing was that I had nobody to play with. So Tarzan was a big deal, so I'd put a rope in a tree and that became my rope course. And I would swing through the trees. Then we would go fishing, and then my parents would build a fire. And then we'd get a big black pot and we'd cook the fish on the creek bank. Then, we'd go out and run through the woods and find out what we could eat. And we learned about different things in the woods. And then I learned about snakes, and then of course there were those opportunities to run into a few animals that scared you to death. Fast forward from those periods, then I we moved eventually to the city of Little Rock, where I joined a Boy Scout group, which was very rare to have an African American Boy Scout group. And that was very rare, so I became a Boy Scout, Order of Arrow, and the whole 9 yards, and went to camp. Then I discovered girls and went to the University of Arkansas, and my camping was over, and I was looking at some other kind of camping. And then finished the University of Arkansas, majored in early childhood education with an emphasis in science, came back and didn't get the job I was promised, and was hired at Camp Aldersgate to work with inner city kids on a weekend camp program. Joined American Camping Association, went through that whole process of being an outdoor living skills instructor. Then I became a head environmental education instructor for the Little Rock School District. And funding fell apart, and I was on an out trip doing canoeing, and Dr. Kay Kessler Oliver and Dr. Betty Knight influenced me, and I said, I want to do more adventure stuff. And they said, there's this group called AEE, but if you go there, you have to not quit us. Well, guess what happened? I showed up at Santa Fe, New Mexico, at the AE conference then, and my life was changed. It was about 1980 at the Glorietta conference.
Glorietta, I was there.
And I met this guy named Rocky Kimball, and I went to his workshop. But at first I thought all these people were really weird. I thought, this is really strange. I didn't know what was going on there. In that process, I was teaching school, but I didn't fit. When I was growing up as a kid, I was an honor student in an all-black school. Then we crossed over to the white schools, and I had difficulties.
What year did that happen, that they actually changed so that you had to cross over?
That was 1962. I was and I met President Kennedy. They let school out.
So that late that they changed the school systems, yeah.
So, yes, and so I was still going to all black schools, and then I went to Central High School, 1957 Central High School, and it was integrated in '57, and then it was shut down in '58, and that was not a rush because of the violence and it was choice integration. So the powers that be were prepared for us to integrate, and there were tracks. And then I was put from being an honor student in the black schools to being a basic student in the white school, but I didn't know what that was. So my education and basic skills instruction were very minimal. Later on, finding out that my high school counselor said I wasn't college material. And from there, this organization embraced me in the deficits of learning that I had. And that moment at the Glorietta complex became home for me in all of my dreams and thoughts. And now I am a camp director running a year-round camp.
Yeah.
in Little Rock.
Yeah, as a former school counselor, it always makes me cringe when I hear somebody say, my counselor said I wasn't college material.
Yes.
And I've heard that so many times, you know, and I just can't imagine why a counselor would even, you know, say something like that.
Yeah.
Makes no
Yeah.
sense.
Well, I can say her name. I don't know whether that's good or bad.
No, you don't need to. There were a lot of people doing it, though.
Yeah, well, she's since passed away, so. But that was one of the things that I fought so hard in terms of my work now to create a safe place for kids. And I identify, and this is home for me. That question, how do I reflect upon myself and try to frame it? Finishing up on the last piece, that reward was, and it was interesting, when Reagan became president, our program was immediately not funded. So I was left hanging to go from a weekend working with inner city kids on the weekend in the outdoors as I was being exposed through the traditional church camp concept, and then practice teaching, substitute teaching, waiting for a full teaching job, which I finally got in the classroom. And I'm gonna be a little Afrocentric because I have to go back to the time by which I was introduced to AEE, and it helps to shape the powerful reward of being discovered in AEE and feeling a sense of purpose. And so as an African American teacher in early childhood education, all they cared about was that I was the big black guy and keep these bad little kids quiet. We don't care if you teach them anything. And so what happened is that I surprised everybody. I learned to read and write. And I had a degree in teaching, so I was not on a behavioral track, I was on an academic track, which I felt in my theories that I was formulating would change behavior because kids would feel empowered because they could answer the question. I evolved to do early childhood education because during the time that I was not funded at Aldersgate, I was doing juvenile delinquent programs, working with senior citizens programs, working with paraplegic Vietnam campers that would come in and needed therapy. And so I was just a hodgepodge of stuff: spina bifida, diabetes, juvenile delinquents, halfway homes, taking kids in the woods, and just discovering through the American Campus Association and just knowing there's something about these woods. So when I was in the classroom, I started taking my kids outside. And I just one day said, look, we got to get these desks, we're going outside. And I pulled back up on my environmental education, outdoor biological instruction, OBIS, you know, learning tree, all of that stuff. And I started making my own curriculum, and my lesson plans were never right. And so the principal had problems. And so the principal and I began to play this game for 5 years. And the bottom line is that I had to come to AEE because I was going to be fired from the classroom. Because I didn't do anything that the public school system asked me to do with my kids, except that my kids began to score higher than any other school classrooms in the Little Rock School District. But what made me really secure is that I had this old camp out there, so I was doing summer camp at the same time I was teaching. So if they didn't treat me good at camping, I was like, the heck with you, I'll go and teach school. If you didn't treat me good in teaching, the heck with you, I'll go and be a camp director. So I was really a rebel rouser. I was free. So with that, I did all of these things with my kids, and then Binky, who was my wife, used to come up, and I'd have aquariums and birds and frogs, and I would go in the junk bin of the school and pick up the record players and AVA players and all of this stuff, and I just fix it and bring it back so my kids all had things to put their hands-on learning. But we would go outside, and the principal would say, Mr. Tollette, are you doing your reading classes right now? Are you doing your language arts right now? You're doing your... Yes, we just happen to be outside in the trees with our chairs. Who says learning's not going on? And so to make a long story short, I saw that I was not fitting in the traditional classroom setting. And I became an advocate for my kids. And in my last year, and I'll fast forward so I don't talk too much, because this is very, wow, it's very powerful for me. I had to decide on my last year of teaching that I had 12 kids that had not passed the magazine tests. And the school district said that if you didn't pass these magazine reading comprehension skills tests by a certain time frame, you could not get those tests. So I'll go on the record as saying I acquired those tests that only came through the principal, but he didn't know that.